Hello everyone and welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 3.33, and in this lesson we're going to take a look at the next effect on our list here, which is the ladder, which is also known as the ladder filter. So those of you familiar with the Moog synthesizers or Moog synthesizers, depending on how you pronounce it, you would know that they famously trademarked and patented what became later known as the ladder filter design. And to not get super technical and super mathy, which you can do if you want, just search up ladder filter design. You can start to understand the math going on. The ladder filter is not a perfect filter, at least in the design, it's not perfect. So for example, if we have a low pass filter and on one of these old Moog synthesizer, we pull down the cutoff, it wouldn't necessarily cut everything evenly. The slope wouldn't be perfect. And so as you're starting to pull down, there's certain frequencies that would continue to stick out regardless. And so it became a very musical sound and something that people absolutely love and will pay a lot of money just to get the ladder filter, which I think they now do sell separately if you want to pick one up. I'm sure they're super expensive and way beyond my price range, but they are out there, they do exist. Inside of Bitwig Studio, I'm not 100% sure in the difference between the sound of the filter and the ladder. So we'll take a listen and compare the two. I'll go back to the low pass 1 here on the filter device, and then in the ladder I'll go to the LP1. This 1, 2, 3, 4 is indicating pulls. Okay, and again, I'm not going to explain the technical details of that, but what you need to know is that 1 is going to be the smoothest cutoff and is probably going to be very similar to what we have here, 4 being the most extreme, similar to what we have here. Okay, that's pretty much all you need to know. So let's set these two up identically, or at least somewhat identically, and see the difference in sound. So I'm going to start with the regular filter. Let's find something that we like here on the chord device. Uh-oh, I've got that self-oscillating filter going. We'll put the resonance to 34%, and let's set the cutoff to, again, 1K. Okay, very cool. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. All right, let's go into the ladder and set those up. Again, our resonance is at, let's do 35 so I don't forget. Okay, so our settings should now be identical. So let's see if we hear any difference in sound. Oh yeah. You can hear how on the ladder filter we are allowing a few more of those harmonics to creep in. That might have to do with the fact that this slope isn't supposed to match this slope. So let's try this on the LP2 and see if we hear a difference. Yeah, to my ears, and even from what we can visually see, there definitely is a difference in how they modeled these and how they coded them. Whether or not that had anything to do with the actual original filter specs on the Moog ladder, I have no idea. But for now, you can hear a difference, and to my ear, the ladder does sound a little bit smoother. So for the most part, our settings inside of the ladder are going to be very similar. What you'll notice is that we have a few more controls, a few more different types of filters. So there's 4 variations on the high pass, 4 variations on the low pass. And again, from 1 to 4, that is going to indicate the steepness of the curve at the point of cutoff. We also have 2 band passes, a peak, which is like a band pass, only a little bit steeper, a notch, which is the inverse of the peak, and then we have a couple of these like morphing filters. So the high pass 2 into the LP1, the high pass 1 into the LP2 and the high pass 1 into the LP3. And you can listen to this and you can hear the variations on all of these. And some of them are quite interesting and quite profound. Let's boost up the resonance a little bit. So I'll give you guys the time to play around with those if you want. As you can see, we have a few new things, though, that have come with this ladder filter. We have an ADSR envelope, which stands for attack, decay, sustain, release. I'll go over that. We have an LFO, and then we have an envelope follower. I'll go over all three of these, and we'll begin with the ADSR. The ADSR is actually only triggered right now by MIDI notes. So we have to use MIDI to actually hear what's happening in the ADSR. So to do that, I've pulled in an instance of the polysynth, and we have a ladder filter here. I'll start the ladder filter again so we can just go from scratch. And this is what I've made the polysynth to sound like. I basically just went back to a default, and I've turned off the frequency. I've turned off the filter basically. So we should just be getting, I guess it's going to be just a saw wave here. Okay, so there's our saw wave. Now let's bring in the ladder. And let's add a low pass 2 for now. That all looks good to me. Turn off this envelope follower. And let's take a look at what happens. When I play this, you're going to see yellow lighting up across here. And once you see that yellow, you're going to realize that it's taking that MIDI data and it's feeding it into the ladder and it's triggering this envelope. So for right now, let's just turn everything off. Okay? Let's take a listen. So right now, all we're hearing is this polysynth going into the ladder. Nothing's happening with the ADSR despite it going to it. And here's your envelope amount. So if we're right on 0, nothing's going to be happening. But as we turn this up, we're going to start to see what happens. And let's pull in, where's the plugin that we like? The span device. So we can see what's happening here. So you're going to already have known what's happening here just by hearing it. Our filter is moving. And so the attack parameter is pretty much going to control how long it takes for our frequency, that's what it's actually impacting here, to go from this point here, its starting point, and it's going to be pulling up. All right, it's going up across the frequency, and that's determined by how much we give it here in the envelope amount. So if I go all the way up, as compared to being down here, not as bright. And then super bright. Okay. Sustain level is where we're going to go to after the attack has completed. So let's not worry about decay for right now. Let's set a pretty quick attack. Let's take a listen to this real quick. So right now, once it finishes its attack stage, it's going to the sustain level, which right now is set to 0, which is going to go right back to where our frequency is set here, which is at 200 hertz. I'll turn it up to a little bit more for right now. And then we can mess with this sustain parameter and we can get it to sound more or less bright. In this case, it's always going to sound more bright based on how high we have this set. Set a longer attack and then a lower sustain. Okay, the decay level is how long, or the decay time, excuse me, is how long it's going to take from the end of this attack to get to the sustain level. So if we boost this up quite a bit, our frequency is going to go up, and then it's going to slowly come back down until we hit our decay level. Let's increase that time. And as I mentioned before, you can really hear the movement when you have a little bit extra resonance going on. Let's increase our release time here. Maybe shorten this note a little bit. And right now, once we reach the end of this note, we're going into the release stage on this ADSR envelope. So if I increase the release, it's not just going to suddenly cut off like you're hearing. Right now, it's just cutting back to that frequency from the sustain level. And then right back down to like 300. If I increase this, it should sound a little bit more gradual. And there you go. It's not just a sudden cut. A little smoother. All right, there you go. And that is pretty much what the ADSR envelope is going to do. For right now, it only works with MIDI clips and with MIDI notes, but you actually have access to another ADSR envelope inside of your modulators. So really, you could use it on audio as well, just not from within the ladder filter parameters. You'd have to manually set this up. We can go back into our audio now and take a look at our other modulator devices here. We have an LFO. An LFO is a low frequency oscillator, and we've talked about the LFO before. Really, it's just going to change these parameters. In this case, we can go back to like a low pass for right now, on a cyclical fashion. So if we look at it inside of the span, it's always easier to look at this and to attempt to explain it. We can turn up the LFO amount here. Let's turn it up quite a bit. Let's hear what we got. Whoop. Whoa. Oh, I'm on the snare like an idiot. All right, we can speed this up. So it's messing with this frequency parameter. Back and forth. Let's bring it down a little bit. And right now, each time it's playing back, this LFO is continuing. So you hear each time the chord plays, the LFO isn't starting over. If you want to start that LFO over so you get a consistent sound each and every time, you can hit the retrigger button. And here we go. In this case, it may not work because we're playing a loop over and over again, so we're not actually giving it a chance to retrigger, but it will work, especially if you're doing this with MIDI notes. Again, they're assuming that you're probably going to be using this filter a lot of the times in conjunction with the polysynth or with another synthesizer of your choosing, because that's typically where you're going to find these filters being implemented. We have a variety of different shapes here, and we'll just quickly listen to those different shapes so you guys can hear. And we can also change the phase. So do we want to start the sine wave from the 0 point in the phase, from 180, from 360? You can set this up. So if we go to 50, we're going to be at the 180 point. Then we'd be at the 270 point at 75, and then back around to 360 at 1. Let's speed it up a little bit. Triangle. Square wave, so like an on and off. Ramp up, like a saw wave going an upward motion. And the opposite of that. going down. See, do I have a... This is the best thing. And then last but not least, the sample and hold circuit, which we've talked about before, is kind of like random. So it's going to be just jumping to random points here and changing our frequency subsequently. Turn the rate up to really hear it. So that one can be a lot of fun. Last but not least, we have the envelope follow. And so the envelope follow is going to take into account the volume changes that are occurring from your original raw signal. And this is going to work best on the drum loop, I think, because if we use the chord, it looks pretty much the same all the way through. There's not really a definite attack release. There's not a whole lot of volume changing. But if we look at the drum loop, we're going to see that we have a bunch of different transients and a bunch of different hits. So you can get some variation using this envelope follower. Right now, I'm going to turn the LFO off. And let's start messing around with this envelope follower. I'm first going to use it on the chord, and you're going to hear how we really can't get too much out of this unless we really lower the release setting and try to just like trick it into thinking that there's more volume changes than are actually occurring. I'll just let you hear it. Right now we see no light, so we're not getting anything. Let's turn this up all the way. So we have to try to hit the timing just right to get some variation. And even then, it's quite difficult. And again, that has to do with the sound being pretty static in volume all the way through. Now let's try it on the drum loop. So increase the gain here. Try to find a sweet spot. And that's pretty much what the envelope follower is going to do. So you can get a little bit of that variation. It would be really helpful if we had something like, if I was to record my voice in and talking at different levels, we could use that envelope follower and we'd start to get some variations on the frequency and the resonance, which would be pretty cool, but I'll leave you guys to experiment with that on your own. I hope that was helpful for you. Just get in here, mess around with all these different filter types, play around with the ADSR on some kind of MIDI track, and also have some fun experimenting with the LFO and the envelope follower. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you again in the next lesson.